Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzalez here in studio with a very special guest, L.A. Marzulli, and we're going to have a great program today. We're going to kind of talk about his testimony and where he got to know the Lord and the entire background of how God has guided him. But before we do, I want to remind everybody about our prophecy conference in Orlando, Florida, March 2nd through 5th. We already have 500 people signed up. It's going to be a great time, nice warm weather there. And you can find more information at prophecywatchers.com and the Orlando Prophecy Summit. We're going to have lots of speakers, again, as always, and great entertainment options and other things. So just want to know that you're invited. So, L.A., always good to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here, Mondo.
You know, that we were thinking that since you're in town and that this would be a great time really to kind of get an insight into the Marzulli mind. I mean, I've known you since 2014, so, you know, I know...
13. Yeah.
So I know a lot of the background here, but I think just what I find fascinating is how God has used you in your history, where He's brought you, again, from the time before you were a believer, and how He's taken those interests that you have and really the experiences that you've had and used them for His glory. And we want to give, our audience a little insight into what is behind the Marzulli man. So... So, where do we start here? Well, for me, start with really before you were a Christian and when and the age you became a Christian and how God had brought you.
Yeah, real quickly, when I was 13, the Beatles were everything. I mean, we were just all swept up and caught up into it. As Russ Dizdar, the late Russ Dizdar, a battle buddy and good friend, used to say that there was one of the greatest influx of occult literature came in the 60s to the United States, and of course it did. So the Beatles were totally embracing Eastern mysticism, and I was raised Catholic, and by 13 I had left the Catholic Church. There was just nothing there for me. So, not disparaging Catholics, but for me, I just left. It just seemed like, vacant, essentially. And all this Eastern mysticism was happening. So by the time I hit like 16 or 17, I was already immersed into New Age philosophy, Eastern mysticism, Carlos Castaneda vision quests, if you know who he is, with the little smoke. And I was beginning to dabble with the drug culture because everyone was doing it basically back then. And, things progressed and I just kept reading all this occult literature and immersing myself in looking for a guru of trying to figure out what was going on. The big change for me, the event that rocked my life and set me really on a quest was the death of my girlfriend, Michelle. So I was 16, she was 14 when we met. And now, fast forward, I'm a senior in high school, I'm 18, she's 16. And it's a true story, and I'm not proud of this, but it's a true story. So I'm on LSD up in my boyhood room that summer, and after I graduated, and I have Michelle's letters and this other woman's letters, and I'm going, if there's a God, show me which one I should be with. Which was, it still kind of haunts me that I would do that. But of course, we know who the God of the world is. And at that time, I was not born again and spirit-filled. I was immersed in all things occult, immersed in the New Age, looking for answers. So about a couple of hours later, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, my father walked into the room and said, Michelle's dead, she's just been hit by a car.
Wow.
And it was like a shock, mentally, physically, spiritually. I mean, it was like, what? Because I had been asking if there's a God, and this is what I get, And so, I mean, it really set me on a quest. What is all this? What are we? Where are we? Who is this God, if he even exists?
Did you feel anger at the time?
I felt incredible remorse, not anger.
Like anger towards God?
That came later. I was perplexed, confused, bewildered, and it's just all of a sudden we realize that, wait a minute, life is very, very fragile, and for some people very short. I visited Michelle's grave on I think the 40th anniversary. I was back in the area. This is all in Pennsylvania. And I didn't know where it was. I thought I knew, but I didn't. So I called one of her sisters. I said, where's Michelle buried? And I went there And this is, of course, fast forward. I'm a pastor, I'm born again, spirit-filled and everything else. And I'm looking down at the gravestone, and I realized she was only 16. It just leapt up at me because both my children had passed that age. So it was very poignant moment. I wept there, not because it was very emotional, very emotional. So, that set me on this quest. One day, there were these flyers around in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, all over the place. The God of the universe has come to us today. And I tear the bill off the phone pole, and my friend John and I went down and we saw Guru Maharaji. And the place was absolutely packed with people. I mean, just packed with people. And he comes walking on the stage. He's like an hour or two late. It's wall-to-wall hippies. Wall-to-wall
So you're
hippies.
what, about 25 maybe?
No, I'm 21.
It's 21.
So
okay.
I forgot something, but I'll get back to that in a second. So he walks on stage and the entire crowd does what's called pranam. They bow to him. And I find myself on the floor for some odd reason. So I listen to this guy drone on and on, 14 at the time, and he goes on for like an hour or two, and he says, the knowledge is free. Come tomorrow. So I went to the ashram in Philadelphia, and I walked in, the place was packed, maybe 30, 40 people in this area, in this room, and the Mahatma walks in with the shaved head and the orange robe, and he droned on forever. And finally in the afternoon, he dispensed knowledge. My third eye was open, I heard celestial music, I tasted divine nectar. Now all of this is occult stuff. Was my third eye open? Absolutely. All of a sudden just bursting of light. Music, I heard flutes and waterfalls. How's that possible? Divine nectar? Absolutely. It's all, the underpinnings of it are occult underpinnings.
But real.
But very, very real. Because they're in tune and they're given over to the dark side, which gives them their power. So I'm spending all this time, and I gave up everything and joined the ashram. So take 2 steps back. Before that, I was at Woodstock. This is the summer of 1969. So, I'm at Woodstock. My girlfriend has just been killed. And it was looking back at it, it was a bacchanalia is really what it was. It was anything goes. They always trump Woodstock as like, oh, this wonderful thing. Yeah, some of the music was really cool. I get that. But it was a bacchanalia. It was utter lawlessness looking back from a different perspective, from a different worldview, from a Christian paradigm, completely different. So I'm in the ashram. I join the Guru's orchestra. I'm flown to England. I begin to write and arrange for a 56-piece orchestra. Are you kidding me? So I would just hole up and write these big band jazz pieces or whatever, and we'd hear them back. And for me, the high point was we were out in Malibu at Camp Joan Meyer. This is years ago, obviously. And Ray Brown, Quincy Jones, and Alice Coltrane come and listen to us. And they're just sitting there, and the conductor, which was the Guru's brother at the time, he's not making bank with these guys at all. So he turns to me out of the blue and he says the name of one of my compositions, which was Big Word. And the band blew it. I mean, everyone played on the thing, and at the end, Alice Coltrane and Quincy Jones and Ray Brown, they all stood up and gave it a standing ovation. But there was no credit to me. No one said, well, who wrote that? There was never, I was just a devotee, just shut up and do your job type of thing. So shortly after that, I realized that, I'm still the same schmuck I was 4 years ago. Nothing has changed internally. In fact, before we got out there was a place, we were in Houston getting ready for the 1974 Millennium deal, where some people were saying the Houston Astrodome was going to physically separate from the planet and take all these people. It was unbelievable, But here's the deal, when Maharaji, the family had not split yet. So you had the mother and the brothers. So they all come out, the band's down here, they're on these dioceses, okay? Well, my friend goes, look behind you, and I turn behind, they're all manifesting. What do I mean by that? They were glowing. They were glowing, okay?
Wow.
And I realize some of you go, that's really unbelievable, LA. It's not, because there was only like maybe 25,000 people that were there. They expected like hundreds of thousands. So it was a dud. But there are only 25,000 people, but the 25,000 people that are there are worshiping the guru and his holy family. So the entities that possess them just manifested. I'll never forget that. So now we're back in California, and I'm, with them, and they're doing all my compositions, and I'm still writing, and I have doubts. I go, you know what? I'm the same schmuck I've always been. Nothing's changed.
It's changed on the inside.
I didn't know what you would call it in Christianese, the sin nature. I just knew nothing had changed. So I'd given up, I was celibate. I gave up meat, fish, and eggs. I was a strict vegetarian. I meditated for a minimum 2 hours every day. I mean, I was into it, about as into it as you can get. And, I was with the guru's brother, for crying out loud, So, I mean, I was as close to it as you could possibly get. I was immersed in it. And one day I just went, I'm not buying this anymore, and I left.
It was bankrupt.
I had $35 in my pocket. I had a few tools, and I got my first job as a carpenter, doing freelance work to feed myself. And then from there, so that's like 24 years old. From 24 to 30, I'm pretty much of an agnostic. I'm really not believing. I don't know who this God is or whether he even exists or not. If he does, great. But, how do you find him? And so I would go on vision quests, and fast and once again, spirit guides.
So you were still using some of your old tools.
Let me tell you one thing.
That you knew. You were using the tools that you knew to try to find
Right.
God. Mm-hmm.
So one day I got picked up by a hitchhiker. I mean, I was a hitchhiker, got picked up by a car. And this guy's smoking some really heavy weed. He goes, you want a hit? I go, sure. Now, I'm not condoning this. I'm not proud of this at all. But this was what I was immersed in. Mm-hmm. This is all I knew. I knew nothing else until. So I take a couple of hits of this thing. Man, I am flying. I mean, I am flying. So I get out of the car, and I'm walking up Encinal. I can take you to the place. I'm walking up Encinal Canyon in Malibu to try to hitchhike back to Thousand Oaks. And it's getting dusk, and I'm just way too stoned to do anything. So I move off into the chaparral. The chaparral is a unique plant life in the Santa Monica Mountains, where I reside now. And I walk in about 30 or 40 feet. I find a little clearing. I sit down, and I begin to meditate. That's all I knew. So I had the thought that came into my head, right? If God is everything and God is everything, then there's nothing to fear. That is totally pantheistic. Mm-hmm. We are two. God is outside of his creation, and then there's you and me and everybody else.
No doubt.
Yeah, we are two, we are not one. And we never will be one. And no matter what you do, you will never be God. That's the lie that we heard in the garden. So I'm sitting there in full lotus position, meditating, and it's night, it's dark, and all of a sudden I hear this, and I kind of go, whoa, what's that? And then to the right, and then behind me, and then to the left. And by this time, I'm like totally freaked out, completely freaked out. And it's coming quicker and closer as it goes around me and around me. Finally, remember, in a lotus position. Finally, it comes right at me, overwhelms me, and pushes me down like this and holds me. I'm not on the ground. I'm like levitating, because you can't do that in a lotus position. You can't lean back and just hold yourself at an angle like that. And slowly let me up, and I jumped up, and I used the Carlos Castaneda technique that I had learned through his books. I tapped my thigh and said, no, I did not want it. I did not want to go. And then it spoke to me and said, if you had trusted, I would have shown you the secrets of the universe.
There's the lie, more lies, right?
Yeah, more lies, right? So that's like probably 5-6 years before I become a born again, and I'm reading all these books. I'm still searching. Nothing's happening. I'm agnostic. God's smart. I don't. It's a really negative attitude, incredible negative attitude. But I'm still looking. So I start reading these Taylor Caldwell books, Great Lion of God, and it's like resonating with me. And somebody gives me the cult. I think it's called The Cult Explosion by Dave Hunt. It's either The Kingdom of the Cults or The Cult Explosion. Okay. I read both of them. And at the end of the Dave Hunt's book, there's a little prayer. I'm alone in my room. There's nobody hitting me over the head with the Bible. I just read Taylor Caldwell and Dave Hunt's book. I think it's Kingdom of the Cults or The Cult Explosion. Forget the title. And I go, okay, here's the deal. If you're real, come into my life. I don't know whether you're real or not, but if you are, Jesus, come into my life. And I kind of wait, and nothing happens at all.
And so you're roughly how old here?
I'm 30.
You're still okay. You're 30. Okay.
And 2 months later, I wake up crying bitterly from a dream. The Lord opened the door, and all the stuff started bubbling up. And then it was like, I can still remember the exact moment. I was living with a woman. We weren't married. And she set dinner in front of me. And at that moment, the veil that separates us from the unseen world was parted. And I got hit by the enemy really hard. I thought I was going crazy. I mean, because I had never experienced anything like this. Our thoughts are not our own. Well, let me put it this way. I can think and go, gee, I want to compose something on the piano, and here's a melody, and I'll work on that and compose something. Or, gee, I want to write a book, or, gee, I want to make a film, and I'll do that, right? So that's who we think. This was something else. This was utterly demonic and depraved. And I just going, where's that coming from? Why am I thinking this? I don't want this at all. And that night I called my first pastor, Pastor Fred, and I made an appointment with him the next day.
How was he your pastor?
Well, it was not my pastor. He became my first pastor. I see. But someone gave us the number because I'm freaking out. Uh-huh. So, and then at the same time, a day later, someone gave me the number of Wayne Kendall, who became my first mentor. So within 24 hours, the Lord had first pastor, a Christian man who was like an ex-hippie and 20 years older than I was, and he became a mentor. And when that church was open, I was there for every single Bible study. I mean, that was it. I used to sleep with a Bible clutched to my chest because the oppression from the enemy was so great. And I just read and reread and read and reread the Bible over and over and over again. I was essentially in Christian boot camp for 3 years. Wayne Kendall, my mentor, used to say, "LA, the Lord has to go in." He sounds like George Bush. Lord has to go in and he's got to rewire you. So it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Later on in the book, The Cosmic Chess Match, I talked about being anyone who becomes a born-again, spirit-filled Christian and is serious about it, spends time in the forge of the Most High God, being heated up in that forge and being placed on the anvil in that forge, and the living daylights are pounded out of you because it's the only way you can get to it. Now, not everybody's like that. Sometimes it's just some refining. With me, it was like 30 years of wrong living, including all sorts of goofy stuff from childhood and trauma and all this other stuff. There was like 3 years of monastic existence. The girlfriend I was living with, she moved out. I came back from work one day, everything in the house was gone. I slept on the floor that night.
She didn't want any of your Christianity?
Nothing at all. She later became a Christian. I haven't seen her since. But the bottom line was, 3 years of being celibate and monastic lifestyle, and then the Lord said, now it's time to date. Oh, okay. And I had my eye on Peggy, and I asked her to go out with me, and she said yes, and 3 months later I asked her to marry me. Yeah. So in my wildest dreams, I never thought I'd be writing books or creating films. Never. I wanted to be a rock and roller. I mean, that's what I was. I left that out of the story. But I mean, I was in bands. We toured all over Los Angeles. We were in and out of some of the most prestigious studios. And we get right up to the signing and something would blow up. It happened over and over and over again. We played at the Troubadour in Los Angeles with Robert and Norman. It was 3-piece. I'm on piano. Bob Dunning's on drums and Norman Johnson's on bass. And no one had really heard of us. We got a standing ovation. Yeah, they wanted us back. We had to do an encore. It was unbelievable. The band was really good, really tight. But it just, the Lord had other plans. I became a worship leader. And from there, things began, because we really don't know who we are. We don't know the gifting that we have. And the enemy, the dragon, wants to keep us as far away from that gifting as possible. And that's why some people go through life and they never become what they could have become, even as Christians, because the enemy keeps them down.
No doubt all of us we recognize that there comes a point where you make that full commitment to the Lord, And he does. I don't know any, especially as a pastor, I don't know anybody that is serious about God that, as you mentioned, that doesn't go through the difficult challenges. God kind of seems like he leaves you. But but he's teaching you to walk by faith, not by sight. Yeah, like, where is he? Where is he? And God's like, no, I helped you walk a little bit in some of the miraculous ways, especially in the beginning, and then he steps back because he's not there to make us robots. He wants us to walk by faith. And so now you've been a believer, you're
43 years.
Yeah, you're walking it, and you're a worship leader. Now, what led you into writing talk about your first 3 books of the trilogy? What led you to get up to write those and the whole idea of the Nephilim?
Well, Frank Peretti's book really, kind of blew me away because it was like, wow, Christian fiction, this is really
Frank
cool.
Peretti, yep.
Frank Peretti was really the nexus, the linchpin for the whole thing. So, but the book that changed my life happened probably about 8 years after I was a Christian. So I'm 38 years old. And I'm not sure what years Peretti's book came out, but around that same time. And I get a hold of, because I'm wondering, what about space? What about life on other planets? What about UFOs? Because I had seen a UFO when I was 12 years old, which was life-changing. And I had been immersed on the other side of the aisle.
What did the New Age say? Did you have any paradigm in the sense of the New Age speaking about that experience?
Oh, absolutely. I believed hook, line, and sinker, that they were our space brothers. They were going to come here and save the planet. I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid willingly, happily. Seconds, please.
So you interpreted that experience when you were a 12-year-old as, hey, that was an experience by these friendly people.
Well, at 12, I didn't articulate it like that.
No, you didn't know that, but later, as you're
later,
looking back.
that's how I look back at it. Oh yeah, I've seen the Space Brothers. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
I was not abducted, by the way. I was not taken.
Good. Okay, so you read Frank Peretti's book.
So I read Frank Peretti's book, and I'm looking for some book on UFOs, right? Because I've always been interested in it. I've always been interested in it and studied it when I was in the New Age and all that, studied it. So I was, a lifelong UFO nut, basically. And the Lord taps me on my shoulder one day and he goes, all the things that you've come through, now we're going to use it for the kingdom. Whoa, what does that mean? So I go down to the bookstore and I go, do you have anything on UFOs? And of course they give me the, whoa, get out of here in Jesus' name type look. And it takes me back, and there's a couple of books, I think 3 or 4, of Dr. I.D.E. Thomas's book, The Omega Conspiracy.
Okay.
I take it home because up till that point, I didn't understand the biblical narrative. I was mad at the God of the Old Testament. I couldn't reconcile Jesus with the God of the Old Testament. They had to be 2 different gods. I knew they weren't, but I didn't know that they weren't. And all of a sudden, Dr. Thomas's book is talking about the Nephilim and who they were, and Genesis 6, and the sons of God, and the book of Enoch. And he's tying all of us together. And then he makes the leap into the whole UFO phenomena. And I'm just sitting with my jaw on the ground. And I contacted him, and he became a mentor to me. And we met numerous times.
Where was he at?
He was downtown Los Angeles, basically.
Oh, so not too far.
Yeah. Century Boulevard, right in there. And so we would meet for lunch, and I pump him and get all sorts of questions answered and stuff. And I received an honorary doctorate from him for my work on the Nephilim trilogy. So Dr. Thomas's book was the basis of a Christian overview of this whole thing. And what it did for me was it reconciled the God of the Old Testament with Jesus. Because now I understood why the flood of Noah, why the confusion of tongues at the Tower of Babel, why Abraham goes after the 5 kings, why Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed. And the big one is why the children of Israel go in and are told to kill everybody in the Promised Land. And it's not because of sin, it's because the genomes, there's the mixing of the seed. And then further on, that resulted in, and 2 of the books became, in the Nephilim trilogy, became bestsellers on the CBA bestseller list.
So wait, people might not know about these books. So you now your paradigm's changing, you're getting knowledge, you're getting biblical framework, and then you decide to write fiction. So, because these 3 books, the Nephilim trilogy, are fiction books.
Yeah.
What led you to go, I want to write a fiction book on this?
Well, Peretti's book. Peretti's book was inspirational.
It was inspirational for that.
And at this time, I knew another author by the name of Bill Myers, who was a good friend. And so I said, Bill, I got this idea for a book. And he said, well, let me know, and I'll see if I can make a connection with my editor, who's the acquisitions editor at Zondervan. So I wrote 3 chapters and an outline. So they passed, and I got on the phone with, I was kind of bummed out, but they passed. And Bill says, well, let me call him and see. So Bill gets the head acquisitions editor on the phone, Dave Lambert, and says, just listen to what LA has to say. So I go, Dave, let me ask you something. Where's the Christian response to this? Why is it that the New Age are running roughshod on what we're supposed to think and believe about UFOs? Where's the Christian biblical response? And I was signed. To a one-book deal.
They signed you one book deal.
One book deal, and the rest is history. The Nephilim became on the CBA's bestseller list. It was the first book, and then an agent picked me up, and we had a deal for the other 2 books. But what happened was Dave Lambert left the company, and the other head editor that came in wasn't interested in my work. So we got and they allowed me to take the books back, which I did. So we own all the copyrights, and we eventually printed them under our own publishing company, Spiral of Life. So that was the nexus. That was the beginning of it.
So roughly what, about 1999, 2000?
1999 was the first one published, and the last one 2005.
Okay.
So a lot of research went into those books.
Yeah, so this is really, God's really guiding you and directing you and shaping you. Again, all the learning, but then doing your own research, and then obviously writing and publishing. And this series, what's the overall, as much as you could, a short version of the story, the plot line of the 3 books?
Well, the whole idea was, thank God for Dr. I.D.E. Thomas, because what happened in antiquity is repeating itself in modernity. There's a definite link, and this goes into our crop circle film called Convergence, which I'm not giving away the farm on that. That'll hopefully come out either late January or early February. Most of it is, we have one more interview to do, and then that's it. That's all I'll say about it. But
so is the Nephilim, is it a left behind type series? And coming into the last 7 years, the 70th week of Daniel, is that where the plot is framed?
Well, it comes into the fact that there's an archaeological dig underneath the Temple Mount.
Okay.
And they discover in this sealed off hidden room that's been there for thousands of years, this giant skeleton. So there's this one, the protagonist, Art McKenzie, is, too much backstory, but he's in Jerusalem meeting with Elijah Ben Hansen, who's an Orthodox rabbi, but he's also spirit-filled. So he's a messianic. Mm-hmm. And they take Art McKenzie into this, where the crypt is, and Ben Hansen is sitting there, and he just looks at Mac and goes, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Anakim. And I get goosebumps just even saying that. And that's the beginning of the story. And because there's a giant there. So from there we go into, especially in the first book, what really happens. Someone is taking the DNA from these giants and creating super soldiers in modernity. And that's all I'll say. But it's like the second book, I poured my heart into that book. There's 3 different plot lines in that book. They all converge at the end. And I mean, it's a very complex way to write. So I did those 3, and then my father said, because I was always talking about politics, prophecy, and the supernatural. He said, why don't you write a book? So that was my first nonfiction book, and Tom Horn picked it up.
So now we're fast forwarding into what year, roughly?
I think 2007.
2007. Yeah. So what are you doing between the
I'm a worship leader.
Oh, so you're still doing the worship?
I'm still doing a worship leader thing.
But you're writing your passion and your interest is the Nephilim, and it's really changing your.
But I also composed this oratorio, The Life of Christ, which was performed all over Los Angeles in different churches, standing room only crowds. And we're actually going to be releasing it here this coming Resurrection Sunday.
So then, Politics, Prophecy, and Supernatural, this is a book. You write it, and what happens next?
It did okay, and then I got the rights back to it from Tom, and I just realized, I need to start my own publishing company. So with all this happens, the convergence of that, if I can use that word again, happens all at the same time. We get the books back from Zondervan. We get the book back from Tom. And Tom was really great, and everything that he did to promote the book, it just never really did anything. And some books are like that.
Yeah, it's true.
It's been out of print, and I keep threatening to rework it because I need to, because it's an important book.
Yeah, it's only getting more timely.
It really is, and I need to do that, and we'll probably try to get to it. I am working on another book at the making right now.
A lot of
That's got
irons
my
in the
attention.
fire.
Yeah, but that was it, and then all of a sudden things really took a turn, and that's when we launched what we're doing now. I never knew that I had the gift of speaking. I didn't know
Wait,
it.
what about Cosmic Chess Match?
Cosmic Chess Match,
What led you to that book?
the Lord. I mean, I get assignments. I'm on assignment now. He gave me the assignment a year ago. I'm just getting to it. I've got basically 3 chapters written, and I'm working on chapter 4. And there's no other book like it. I can say that without any hubris. It's because it's not me. It's like, LA, here's your assignment. It's like, what? Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Because he gives me stuff from my wheelhouse, stuff that I'm interested in. It's not, your best life now or whatever. It's not, with all due respect, it's not that. It's like these are sort of a deep end of the pool and things that, just come to church and don't worry about these things. It'll all be, well, I do worry about these things, not worry, but I'm intrigued by some of these things, I'll just give you a little hint. What was that flaming sword in the garden that turned every which way? And I'll just leave it at that.
Yep. So Cosmic Chess Match, that title, what are you referring to there? How'd you get there?
Well, the Lord showed me that there's this move, counter move, all throughout the biblical narrative. And when we begin as Christians to look at the biblical narrative that way, it changes everything because we can see the moves. We can see the move and then the counter move. So the first move is Genesis 1:1. Is it a recreation? There are people who will argue that till the cows come home. And we get that. In my opinion, it is absolutely a recreation because Satan, the dragon, and all the hosts of heaven just don't rebel in the first 3 days of creation. That's stupid. It's like, well, I'm just created and doggone, I'm going to rebel. What does rebel mean? I don't know, but by golly, we're going to do it.
There's obviously, you think about that.
There's a gap.
There's a history there behind that. Satan and the angels, there was a rebellion prior, and there's different people that embrace. It doesn't necessarily need to be millions of years. It could be short, but no doubt they were existing prior. Job 38 says that exact thing. They were clapping and rejoicing and singing.
Right.
But obviously there was a rebellion that took place prior to Genesis 3. How far back? We have no idea.
We don't know. And that's, we don't know, but it's not.
But we're introduced to this rebel right there
right from the beginning.
At the 3rd chapter.
So you get this move, counter move. So God creates mankind, and that's okay, there it is. Are we the replacements for the fallen angels? In my opinion, we are. He never does anything the same thing twice. I've known that for 43 years. If he works one way, he will not work that way again. He'll change it up and just do something a little different because he's incredibly creative. Now, that's not saying he doesn't, he can do the same thing again, but most often he likes to mix things up and change things. So it's like, we're the replacement parts for the fallen angels. So that's the move. That's the counter move to the rebellion. The rebellion happens first. The counter move by the Most High God is the creation.
Create human family.
Yeah. So the counter move from the dragon. Oh, we're going to go in. We're gonna mess with this thing big time. And so the fall happens, right? The counter move from the Most High God. Messiah will come. Someone, Genesis 3:15, will crush your head, Mr. Dragon. You'll bruise his heel. The Messiah coming. That's the counter move. And from there, the counter move is Genesis 6, when the Nephilim are on the earth, because, no one's going to come and crush my head. We'll just pollute the entire genome, and Messiah can't be born. The counter move from the Most High God, not so fast, citizen, the flood. The counter move from the flood, right, is the Tower of Babel with Nimrod, who becomes Geborim. What's the counter move of that? We just confused their language. I mean, when we start looking at that, everything in the biblical narrative is move, counter move, move, counter move. We are at war. Yeah. And so that's what the cosmic chess match, because it is. Calvary changes the deal. It's checkmate, it's over. Sorry, Mr. Dragon, it's done. You can stomp and spit and lie and cheat and act like a spoiled brat, but it's over. Yeah. The king is coming back, you're toast.
It's amazing to me because I think of 1 Corinthians 2, 7 and 8, where it says that if the the rulers, the arche. And some people say is that human rulers or angelic rulers, but it's used for angels as well. If they had known, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory.
Never.
And so God
Never would have done it.
God outsmarted them. I think of Colossians 2, where Jesus triumphed over them publicly, putting them to humiliation.
Public skeptical.
Yeah, so you're like, so I like the Cosmic Chess Master title, but you think, why? Would you really consider playing chess with God? I mean, well, talk about from the beginning.
Hubris.
The foolishness, the pride, thinking that you actually could win. And even if you, like, ooh, I got his bishop, and God's like, yeah, I gave you my bishop.
Yeah. Just wait.
Just wait. I got your bishop, but then I just checkmated you. So we see this in the history of Scripture where there's this drama unfolding, no doubt, and God is leading you to write about it in the Cosmic Chess Mass. And then, now you switch. Not that you stopped writing, but now you feel called to go into film. And how did you get there? How did you go from, the writing? You've had some success with these books, some more than others, as always. But now you're like, I want to film. I want to speak. I want to be in front.
Right.
Talk about that.
The speaking thing didn't manifest till 2 years later. Although when I was 5 years old, and I vetted this with my parents before they died, and also my aunt and uncle, they were there too. So I'm 5 years old. I can't read or write, and Catholic family. And we're all sitting around the big dining room table on Sunday afternoon after church, and I dragged my grandfather's hassock out, his ottoman out. That was my pulpit, because I'm a little guy. I'm 5 years old, for crying out loud. And we put the Bible. I take the family Bible and open it up. I can't read, and I'm preaching my first
You're pontificating
sermon.
from behind.
I'm absolutely pontificating all day long, preaching my first sermon, and it was this. They remembered the title. What is the truth?
Oh wow!
At 5 years old.
Yeah.
That lays dormant. That's my true calling. That lays dormant until years even after I'm a Christian. And I speak and I realize, oh my gosh, I love this. I come alive in front of a live audience. I love it. There's no stage fright. It's like, I can't wait, that type of thing. And I'm passionate about it because I believe in this, because I've been on both sides of the aisle. I was deceived by Eastern mysticism. I was deceived, deception, let no man deceive you, by the UFO phenomenon and the Space Brothers. I was deceived by the New Age, deceived by the whole UFO thing, deceived by the Woodstock doctrine of free love, and the drug culture, deceived. And then what is the truth? The truth is God's word. The truth is Jesus. The truth is realizing that he came, and by his shed blood, we have a new life. Our DNA begins to change. We have eternal life with him. Oh, and guess what? He leads us into who we really are. Because I didn't know any of this. If you had told me 43 years ago, before I was a Christian, that I'd have 14 books written and over 25 films, and I would look at you and go, well, you're not talking about the same guy here now, because none of that's even on the radar.
Yep.
It's not. I just want to be a rock musician, man. Leave me alone.
Yep.
Right?
God doesn't give us that information. Yeah. Because I think it would intimidate us, or we would seek to fulfill it in our own strength.
And we can't.
Yeah.
It's all him.
I mean, I never envisioned being here interviewing anybody on television. Never even entered the radar. Never even had a desire.
Right.
But God has other.
Yeah, God has other. It's like,
there's like,
hey,
oh,
Mondo,
okay.
come over here.
Yeah, come over here. We got this. So now you meet Richard Shaw. I mean, our brother, dear departed, with the Lord right now. So you meet him, and then you guys come to this thinking of, hey, let's make a film.
I was on Coast to Coast with George Norrie talking about, some UFO thing, or maybe the Cosmic Chess Match, I don't know which. And Rick heard me on Coast to Coast. So he writes me, hey, I'm a producer in Hollywood. And of course, I'm just laughing at that, right? Sure you are. And so we meet for lunch, and we really hit it off.
It's about 2010 or so, right?
This is...
Maybe 09?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I have to go back and look. But, one thing led to another, and there was a casting call for this show. And in Hollywood, they do casting calls. They say, we're going to make a show, we're going to call it The Dark Area. It'll be like, the place where, well, what is the truth about Loch Ness Monster. Is there a dark area there? You know, is it one or the other? Can we? So I went down. Someone said, LA, you should go down and be one of the hosts. That's what they were interviewing for. So go down there. There's a bunch of actors and actresses, a psychic, a magician. There's a couple of guys from the old Ghost Hunters show. I was just hysterical. And they gave us like a mock situation to do, which I won't get into. But I walked out of that completely disillusioned. It was a waste of a time and a waste of a day. And of course, the show never got made. And I got to the car and I go, Rick, we need to do our own film. We need to do what we need to take control of a narrative on UFOs. He goes, how much money do we have? I go, we don't have any money. He goes, okay, great. Do we have any cameras? So we had a friend, Lee, and he borrowed the camera from Lee. That's Watchers 1.
Watchers 1.
Watchers 1. One camera shoot, and we're doing all this stuff, and Rick and I are having the time of our life, and we print like 100 of these things, right? And we put them up on the blog, DVDs, put them up on the blog. They're sold out in 24 hours. Rick, you're not going to believe this. We sold 100 DVDs. Oh, my gosh.
So you're going too fast here for me. How'd you come up with the Watchers? What Watchers of
David
what?
Flynn.
What does that mean, Watchers?
David Flynn.
Are we talking about like the Genesis 6 Watchers, or are we talking about being Watchers of prophecy like we are?
It's a double entendre.
Okay.
Is what it is. It's both. And hats off for David Flynn, because his website was Watcher Website. We all went to school at Watcher Website.
And what was he referring to?
He was referring to the Watchers.
The actual Watchers.
For the Book of Enoch.
Like Daniel 4.
Absolutely,
There's Watchers.
like Daniel, right. But the bad guys.
The bad guys.
The bad Watcher angels. So it was like a little twist of words there. It's the Watcher angels, but we're Watchers.
Okay, yeah.
We're watching. We're watching what's going on. And so we printed 200. That sold within 24 hours. And then...
What was the topic of the first film?
It's just UFOs.
Just UFOs in general, given a Christian paradigm?
Yeah, from a Christian paradigm. And my two testimonies are in that film.
But obviously there was an interest.
Yeah. And Rick goes, maybe we should make another one. So we did. And, we had a little bit of money, but not much. I mean,
Enough to continue the work.
Rick was the master at guerrilla filmmaking. He taught me everything I know about filmmaking. And now I have a new mentor, Gil Zimmerman, who worked 30 years at Disney. And Gil has come in and is helping with some of the editing. And, we also go to these sites now. And so instead of me being the camera and trying to figure camera guy in all these hats and, okay, Peggy, press the red button. So now I got a real camera guy. And so Gil and I are on Alma Trail filming. In fact, when I get back, we'll be in the Phoenix area early January filming the last segment for the crop circle video. And I won't tell you who that's with, but I think you'll find it really fascinating.
Well, before you go, so if you haven't seen the Watchers series, I don't want
They're
to go
great.
too fast. So what I enjoyed...
Mondo, it's groundbreaking.
It is.
And there's no other Christian film company that even comes close to uncover what we uncovered. It's unbelievable.
We like to talk here that we like some of the fringe. I mean, we're theologically centered in Jesus Christ alone.
All day long.
But some of the other fringe topics that are interesting to a lot of people, and myself included, that's how I came across your blog, and that's a different story. But the Watcher series, if you were to summarize, the 10 films, and how they progressed. Kind of give us a summary of how they morphed and how you were like, let's do this topic, let's do it. What caused that?
Well, Rick and I would go, well, what about, let's say Watchers 3 or Watchers 2 or Secrets of the Supernatural, or when someone sent me a video of Brian Forrester at the old Paracas Museum handling elongated skulls. Rick, we got to get out and film this. And we did.
That's an interesting topic. We want to get to the
go
bottom
check
of it.
this out. Are these the remnants of a Nephilim? And you were involved in that. In my opinion, these are possibly the Horites, the cave dwellers. That's conjecture on my part, but the DNA, I mean, nobody does.
But that's what, like 7?
That's number 7.
So you're going too fast here.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
So let's go 1, 2. If you remember,
I can't. I have to have it in front of me.
Not all of it, but just some of the topics that you were.
Well, but Secrets of the Supernatural, like when we talked to Barry Schwartz with the Shroud of Turin, and Dame Isabel Pixick, who went home with the Lord, and we walk into her studio. The ceilings were this high. The ceilings were huge murals. Her stuff, her artwork pieces hang all over the world, in the Vatican, for crying out loud. I mean, she was an amazing artist. She did this full-length sculpture of the Shroud of Turin, full length. And she was the one, because she's an artist, but she's also a particle physicist. So she's got right brain, left brain thing working full time, one of those rare individuals. And she was the one who postulated that the body was levitated in that tomb. Jesus' body was levitated in the tomb. The shroud was pulled taut between and above and below the levitated body. And that's the Father going like this, embracing. And then in perhaps trillions of points of light, the body vanishes. Now, I know, the shroud's just a Catholic relic. No, it's not.
If people research it, there's no way.
You got to research it.
There's no way. So what are some of the other topics you guys address in the Watcher series?
Well, Secrets of the Supernatural, that was, interviewing Dame Isabel Pixick, Barry Schwartz, who was the Stratospheric Research Project. He was the lead photographer. He stayed up. They had 120 hours to look at the shroud and do whatever they were going to do. Out of that 110 hours, he's thousands and thousands of photographs. So, that was a really big thing. We also got into, later on, the Black-Eyed Kids, that was a home run.
Now, let's stop there. Black-Eyed Kids.
What's that? Why should we care?
Well, I think it's there's this interesting. It's unbelievable. Let's just right there at the front. It's unbelievable. But again, you heard about this and you're like, okay, let's research it. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's document it. Because again, there's all these fringe things that oftentimes Christians are afraid to touch. So, and most of it, as we probably imagine, is very dark. But the enemy is very active in a variety of ways. But you decide, let's research this. And let's talk about it.
Know your enemy. You can sit in the pew all you want. Know your enemy. So we heard about Black-Eyed Kids, and I immediately thought Nephilim. It's got to be some sort of breeding program, because we know about the breeding program. In our Watchers film, we interviewed Dr. David Jacobs, who studied under John Mack. He interviewed hundreds of people, and I get it. People abducted. That's our UFO film on number 4, which was unlike any other film I've ever done. In some ways, the most important film I've ever done, because it exposes the end game of the dragon. So my paradigm is always a biblical paradigm, hailing back to the Genesis 3:15 narrative, where that seed war is first mentioned, springboarding over to Genesis 6, where it erupts, and then from there, that seed war continues until the cross. But then it changes and it morphs. And the Black-Eyed Kids, in our opinion, are genetic manipulation, but they're stunted. They're not children. They're far older than children, but they're stunted. They're in a fixed state. They're irredeemable because there's no soul there. And they are hybrid entities. They are hybrids. The modern day hybrids, the Black-Eyed Kids are in the 90s and in the early 2000s. Now we're getting into hybrids. People having encounters with these entities that can pass for human. How does that work?
And this is the stuff that we've talked about here, and David Jacobs writing about in his several books, but his latest 2015 book, Hybrids Among Us, or however the title
Walking
is.
Amongst Us.
So you're in the Watcher series, you're in these topics. You also get into, I remember with Roger Lear. Again, this is an interesting
Mondo, you and I could sit
topic
here for the rest of the day and talk about the voluminous work that's there. The hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours. Not only the writing, but all the films. And film is the ultimate medium, because you're writing a script, but you've also got music that's involved, and then you've got cinematography. So it's just as a medium, as an artist, as a truth teller, for me, film is it's the end all. I'm still writing books. I'm working on a new one, but the film is where I really spend most of my days. I do my daily show, and then I sit in front of the computer and edit.
Yeah, the thing that I like about the Watcher series is these topics that you normally wouldn't find addressed anywhere else. You did this. You guys did this really from 2010 on. So you have 10 films. Implants, you name it, all supernatural, paranormal, cattle mutilations, crop circles. And a lot of that is kind of in seed form. And then, sadly, Richard dies.
Yeah, Richard died.
He dies young. He's what, 65?
Yeah, he just turned 65.
Yeah, he died a few years ago. And again, beloved brother. So you end up now going out on your own and you're like, I'm going to continue to make films, and then you start On the Trail series, which I got to be a part of, and many of those. Give us kind of the background of the On the Trail series.
Well, I say this I just did one today. I did a rebuttal on the article that you sent me, Mr. Gonzalez. But, it was just, there's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. It's a hidden history. It's there. It's all around us. It's all around the Americas, South America, North America, all over Europe.
Middle East,
Middle East, it's everywhere. And, nothing to see here, just keep moving along, And so we started off with the Paraka Skulls. That was really the opening to it. But what changed my life, and I'll never forget this, my good friend and battle buddy, the late Russ Dizdar, I'm going to speak at this conference in Ohio. Russ called me up and goes, LA, do you know where you're going? Yeah, I'm going to Newark, Ohio. Newark, Ohio.
What year roughly? 17?
Oh,
16?
16, 15, 16, maybe 14. Okay. I'm really bad at dates.
It's fine.
It's like when you work like that, it's just a big blur. But so Russ goes, you know where you're going? I go, yeah, I'm going to Newark, Ohio. And he starts laughing. You have to know Russ because when he had something that he was going to, he had this little mischievous this mischievous little laugh. So he's cracking up, and he goes, "Are you by your computer?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Google fallen angels in the Ohio Valley, the Nephilim Chronicles." I go, "What?" He goes, "Fallen angels in the Ohio Valley."
And that, you had already written about this. You already known about this.
But
not this.
But not this.
Not this angle.
I figured the Nephilim was done. Ho, was I wrong? By Fritz Zimmerman. Hi, Fritz.
Yep.
And I email Fritz. Takes him a couple of days to respond. I fly to Newark, Ohio. And this is one of those moments in a person's life. And many people never get this. Some people do. It's a gift and it's a blessing. So I'm there with my driver taking me from the hotel to the conference, and I go, "Hey, where's this Great Circle Mount?" Because I had immediately ordered the PDF file. I'm reading it on the plane.
Yeah.
"Where's this Great Circle Mount?" "Oh, it's up here. We've been going by it every day." "What?" He goes, "Oh yeah, it's the North Earthworks." So I go, "Look, tomorrow's Sunday. I'm done at 2 o'clock. Bring me back here. Give me a couple of hours." He goes, "Sure." So the next day, he brings me back to the Great Circle Mountain. Never been there before. He parks in the parking lot, lets me off, and then leaves. I'm the only person there. It's orchestrated. There's nobody else there. Orchestrated. I mean that.
God's guiding you.
And I walk up this 4-foot asphalt path, looking to my left. Even now I can feel the tingle. And there are the mountains, and I'm kind of going like, wow, what is this? And I get up to the top, and I look to my right. There's the museum, which is closed. And I look to my left, and there's the entrance. And I walk towards the entrance, and I stop in the entrance of the Great Circle Mountain. And I'm not moving a muscle. I am overwhelmed by the Spirit of a living God. My breath is coming in, and I'm hyperventilating. I'm going like this. Afraid to move a muscle. Just standing rigid and still. My eyes are like taking in everything. Like that. And I realize I am looking at the rest of my life.
Yeah, there's a realization.
I am looking at the rest of my life. There are now 7 films in the On the Trail series. Number 8 is on Out of Place Artifacts, which might come out in February, March, because it's mostly edited. We're just fine tuning it. I've got one more interview, which is already done, to edit and put it in, and it's finished. And that'll be number 8 in the series. And we've got lots of other films that we haven't gotten around to edit. So that's what we're, with Gil on board and John Adam Hicks. He edits all the daily shows, and he creates the timelines for me. So instead of just going, oh my gosh, what's on this SD card? I give it over to John Adam. He writes me the timeline. So I can just look at the timeline. Oh, it's 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I asked this. Yeah, I want to go there. Boom. That's how that works.
I mean, I've appreciated certainly being part of what you're doing with On the Trail, especially because you look at what's going on in this history of America, and it's interesting how you have books out there that are like, oh, the myth of the mound builders, blah blah blah, all these people, and I've been doing some research in the Smithsonian stuff. And you're like, it's not a myth. It's there.
It's not a myth.
And we've done interviews, and I'm working on a book to show that. But it's looking at the history in America that you and I have talked about of the mounds, and you've
Right.
talked about the mystery of the mound builders, the trigonometry, the archaeoastronomy, all these things. We just were filming there at the Octagon Mound not too long ago, again, for this series, and looking at this advanced knowledge that the Native American peoples today go, well, we never did that. I mean, we didn't have any writings. There's no written languages. I think the Cherokees maybe are the only ones, but that was much later. But you have all this mystery going behind, and again, it documented so much in the Smithsonian and how they were doing this. So you have this entire series, which is not done yet. We have so much more that we're working on. We have stuff going on next year, which we're excited about. But to me, that's exciting. So you have that one going along, but you also talk about Portugal and the Fatima. I mean, that's another thing that, again, these, what I think is interesting topics, and you're looking, as a researcher, I'm going to go film these, and was there 2 or 3 films on Fatima?
Fatima has 2 films. We spent 2 weeks there on the 100th year anniversary, 2017. So these were my second and third films, apart from Rick. Rick was still alive then. He was working on Torah codes and also looking for the Ark of the Covenant. And then he passed away. So we go to Fatima, and we create 2 films. And the way that happened was, I'm getting ready to go to church on a Sunday morning. Peggy's in the bathroom, getting ready. And the Lord gives me one where he speaks to me like this. He taps me on the shoulder and goes, Fatima. And I kind of go, oh my gosh, it's 2017. It's the 100th year anniversary. And I walk in, the bathroom and I go, Peggy, we're going to Portugal. We're going to make a movie on Fatima. She goes, what? And that's how the Lord works. Out of the blue, we got this donation for $12,000 from a person that we didn't know. That paid for the entire trip. The airfare, our good friend, by another series of coincidences.
Providential workings.
Providential things. There was a man over in Portugal who had been emailing us, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, which is really annoying, because what are you doing? And I said, we're going to come to Portugal, and we want to interview some people. Well, this gentleman knew Francisco Carrera, who's head of Exopolitics Portugal, and Francisco knows everybody in the Fatima story. I mean, you want to talk providential. So we had carte blanche with Fina de Armada's daughter. We had carte blanche because Fina was dead. Fina and Joaquim Fernandez wrote the books Celestial Lights, which gave another version of the Fatima story. And if you think you know what Fatima is, think again, because everything we source from is from the 1917 handwritten documents by Father Fiera. Everything.
You go to the original sources, yeah, exactly.
The original documents. Nothing that happens after Lucia is in the convent for 8 years, and then she writes her memoirs. 1917. That's what we draw from. And there are 2 Fatimas. There's the Fatima that people want to believe, which the church, makes a big brouhaha over, and then there's the real Fatima. Because the entity that appeared to the children was wearing a short skirt. It fell just below her knees. That's supposed to be Mary in the Bible? I don't think so. Not for a New York Minute. And it was a UFO event. We call the first film Harbinger of Deception because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So you do the 2 Fatima films, but again, you're so busy. So coinciding with that, now you have the 4 UFO disclosure films, which again, the one just is fresh off the press. So and there's more coming. In the sense, because this is a topic that's not going away.
It's not.
What's your phrase?
This is the coming great deception.
Yeah.
UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away.
And so here we are as Christians, which I think this is fascinating too, because again, this isn't necessarily your Sunday sermon topic. I was a pastor, okay? This isn't what you do in Sunday, but this is a very interesting topic that needs to be addressed, and I would address these things in a Sunday school or a Bible study because it's interesting. And we also, what's the goal? The goal, I mean, you and I have talked, the goal is evangelism. The goal is to reach people. And we've had people email us, and we've shared those with you. It's like, hey, I was watching Marzulli stuff, and my aunt watched it, or my uncle watched it, and they end up coming to know the Lord because, again, you're bringing it through with a very non-intimidating style. You're welcoming the discussion, which most often is often, sadly, taboo in the church. But you're saying, no, I'll have the discussion. Let's do it. And then again, your goal, the overarching paradigm is the gospel. and it's understanding the
good
war.
news, yeah.
The good news. The good news recognizes that there's this war, as you mentioned, all along. And so let's. What's next? What's next for Marzulli? What you have? I know you have many irons in the fire, but what's happening?
Well, we're working on the book, which I won't tell you the title of yet until it gets closer to print. But I'm working on chapter 4. There's an artifact which came out of the Crusades, which someone has handled, and that's all I'll say.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get a hold of the gentleman who's handled the artifact. I've actually sent him an email yesterday, and he hasn't responded yet, but I think he will. And the book is, in my opinion, is going to be really interesting because it delves into the supernatural. But number 4 in the series, on the UFO series, Exposing the Dragon's Dark Secrets, what's important about that film is we expose the end game. It's Daniel chapter 2. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave. That word cleave, Jim Williamson did an exposition on that. It's the same word that we have in Genesis. And leave his husband, leave his mother and father, and cleave to his wife. There's no marriage ceremony in this. They will not cleave to them in Daniel. There's no marriage in the abduction phenomena. The 2 women, Angela and Karen, in the film, it's visceral. Their testimonies are absolutely gut-wrenching and visceral. In fact, there's one when Karen gives her last words, her final thoughts, I should say, not last words, but her final thoughts. The camera's running. I left it there.
Yeah, you let it hang.
I left it there.
It was powerful.
And just to show the emotion that she carries because of what happened. Yeah. And then the 2 men, the same thing, Al and Emil. This is real. The one we're working on now is called Convergence.
It's part of the UFO disclosure series.
It's part of UFO, and I already filmed this way back in 2019 with Francisco Carreira, head of Exopolitics, Portugal, and Hugh Newman, researcher, been all over the place. And we're there at Avebury, in that whole area, at the Crop Circle Museum, which was absolutely phenomenal. The photography was amazing. And so we're talking about all of this. Then from there, we fast forward, or we drop the viewer into another site in the Americas. That's all I'll say about it. And what you'll see is a convergence, and that I'm not going to give away the farm.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that this film is unlike any other, once again, because what it does is it links what is happening in modernity to what happened in antiquity, and in ways that are absolutely astonishing. That will come out end of January, early February. Like I said, I'm down to the last interview, and I'll fly back to California tomorrow. Wednesday, Thursday, I can't wait to get back in the edit booth and get some of this stuff, put to bed, as it were.
It's been great because LA, I appreciate that the Lord has given you youth at 72, okay, and so you have again, we're not done. We have a lot of work that we're working on as it relates to the mound builders and that entire history, and then you have the UFO disclosure series, and there's other things in the pot as well. But it's an exciting time and a lot more. Especially
a lot more coming.
Yeah, especially as you think about, in general, you have the word convergence. It's such a perfect word. I don't think it should ever be overused, or could it ever be overused? Because not only in all the prophecy things that we're discussing, as it relates to all the rest of prophetic end times events, but in these things, it seems like God is revealing so much all at this end.
Things that were hidden.
The things that were hidden. And that really, I think about, I watched the Ancient Apocalypse with Graham Hancock. And
great series.
Yeah, great series. Excellent series. But I was thinking, this is what so much of, you're like the Christian version of what he's coming at from a not necessarily biblical perspective at all, but he doesn't know, or he does, or he's rejected. I don't know. But it's like, if you want that and then you watch yours and you bring it together, you're like, hey, here's the biblical response.
We have the answers. That Graham Hancock doesn't have.
Yep.
With all due respect to Graham, because he's a great host and he's a great researcher.
He's a great researcher.
But we've got answers because we embrace and walk in the biblical prophetic narrative. We embrace the biblical paradigm completely. So we get the answers because the Holy Spirit's leading us and, tapping us on the shoulder and going, look at this, look at this, look at this, convergence.
Yep, amen. Well, I appreciate your giving us the history of, this has been fun. And again, at the end of the day, the gospel is the center, and it all points back to the victory that Jesus Christ had over his enemies, and not only the spiritual enemies that you see, but scripturally the human enemies that we know as we approach the end of the age. The world, Psalm 2, the world turns and they see Jesus coming and they turn and they want to break the bands, but we know that Jesus has the victory, and for those that are watching, the answer is found in Him, in the gospel and the good news that salvation can only be found through Him.
Amen.
And there's a lot of deception, and that's why the characteristic.
That's why we make the films and the books.
That's why the reason. That's why we're here. We're here to watch. Jesus tells us to watch in Mark 13:37, and also to use some of these other fringe topics, which I think are fascinating for those that are caught up in the deception. So appreciate you watching. This has been a fun time, LA.
Absolutely.
And,
thanks, Mondo.
Getting from beginning to end of LA's and even the future. So appreciate you watching.